Everyone thinks the Middle Ages were simple and knowable. They weren't. Some mysteries from that time remain perfectly, stubbornly unsolved. Somewhere around the year 1150, in the English village of Woolpit, something happened that no one could quite explain then, and no one has been able to explain since. Not because the event was kept secret, but because it was witnessed by enough people to make it real, yet strange enough to remain forever uncertain. Two children, a boy and a girl, appeared in the village without explanation, speaking no English, their skin bearing an unusual greenish tint that gradually faded over time. They were not from anywhere nearby. No one had reported missing children. No one knew their names or where they'd come from. The children were discovered near a wolf pit, a trap used to catch predators that threatened livestock, which is where the village itself took its name. They were wandering, confused, wearing clothes of a strange, unfamiliar cut. When local people tried to speak to them, they responded only in a language no one recognized. Their eyes were wide, their movements uncertain, as if they'd stepped out of a place that operated by different rules entirely. What happened next is where the accounts begin to blur slightly, as medieval histories often do. The children were taken in, fed, and gradually, over weeks and months, they began to learn English. Their skin color slowly normalized. But here's what troubles the story even now: they were never able to explain where they came from. Not because they refused to, but because their own memories of it seemed hazy, dreamlike, almost impossible to translate into words. The girl, who was older, eventually spoke more fluently than her brother. She described a land with softer light than England's, where everything seemed perpetually twilight. There were people there, but they were strange, not quite like the villagers she now lived among. The boy, younger and more withdrawn, said very little. He seemed to understand less, to remember less, as if the crossing from wherever they'd been had clouded his mind more deeply. The children's story, as preserved in medieval chronicles, mentions details that no one fabricating such a tale would likely invent. The girl spoke of hills, and a river she could see but never quite reach. She mentioned that in her place, there was always a kind of greenness, in the light itself, perhaps, or in the way the world was colored. She said that food there tasted different, and that she couldn't quite explain why English food felt so heavy, so real, so permanent in her mouth. What no one knew then, what the children themselves couldn't have known, was that their story would be recorded by monks and passed down through centuries, becoming one of the most enduring mysteries of medieval England. The chronicles that mention them don't dismiss the account as fantasy. Instead, they record it as something witnessed, something real enough to write down, but strange enough that no explanation ever quite fit. The boy died not long after arriving in Woolpit. The records are vague about the cause: illness, perhaps, or simply an inability to adjust to this new world. The girl survived, grew older, eventually integrated fully into village life. But she never stopped being the girl who appeared from nowhere. She never fully belonged, and the village never fully forgot what she represented: a gap in understanding, a door that opened and then closed, leaving only questions. Over the centuries, scholars have proposed explanations. Perhaps they were from a hidden community somewhere in England, and their strange appearance was a medical condition, some form of arsenic poisoning, perhaps, that caused the greenish skin. Perhaps they were traveling performers who'd lost their way. Perhaps they were simply children with an unusual illness, and their story grew stranger with each retelling. But none of these explanations quite settle the unease the story creates, because the children's account was consistent. The girl, over time, gave details that didn't shift or embellish. She wasn't trying to convince anyone of a grand narrative. She was simply trying to describe something she'd experienced, something that existed in a place that might not have been England, might not have been anywhere on the map anyone knew. What troubles historians most is this: the accounts we have come from monks who were recording what they heard, not inventing a story. Medieval chroniclers, by and large, didn't fabricate tales out of nothing. They recorded what was told to them. And what was told to them was a mystery they couldn't solve. So they wrote it down and passed it on, the way you might pass on a question you couldn't answer, hoping someone in the future might understand. The Green Children of Woolpit have never been explained away. They've simply been carried forward through history as a kind of persistent whisper, a reminder that the medieval world, for all its apparent simplicity and closeness, contained mysteries that refused to yield to understanding. The children came from somewhere. They lived. They died. And where they came from remains, even now, perfectly unknown. Subscribe for more gentle mysteries from history. Stories that settle slowly, like sleep itself, reminding you that the world still holds questions without answers.